Good morning, everyone. We're just going to give it a couple more minutes here as people start to join. So just hang tight for another couple minutes here. For those just joining, we are just giving it just another minute here for everyone to get logged in. And we'll start in about a minute or so here. All right, I think I see a few more people lingering in here. I have 10:01 on both my computer and my phone. So Tammy, if you're good, I think we'll go ahead and get started here. Well, thank you everyone and welcome to another one of our WA Group webinar series. Thanks for joining us this morning. My name is Amy Strike and I'm one of the benefit consultants here with WA Group. Today I'll be joined by Tammy Seaman from Task, who I'll introduce shortly, but we're going to start with some of our housekeeping items. So as the last few people start to linger in here, you will see you are joined without access to your microphone. That's just to eliminate any disruption. So if you do have any questions throughout the presentation, please submit your questions or feedback into the Q&A section that is in your Zoom meeting. We will be compiling all of the questions that come in at the end and submitting an FAQ to everyone who is on this webinar today. We will also provide that FAQ on our website, which is walivebig.com, as well as a replay of this webinar and the slides. So again, please submit any questions into the Q&A function in the Zoom feature there. The webinar will go for about 45 minutes. So you can expect about 10:45 we'll wrap up here. And to start, I'm going to introduce our WA Group team. So again, I'm Amy Strike. This is the rest of our WA Group Benefits exec team. If you have any questions or requests after the webinar, please feel free to contact any one of us, either by phone or email. I will be providing this slide again at the end, and I'll leave it up for you to be able to write down any of our contact information. So to start, who is WA Group? We are a local 100% employee-owned risk management firm. We work with employers of all sizes to identify business and people-related risk within your organization. We then create a strategy to address those risks. And we do that by going through what's called our VAST process. VAST starts with identifying your goals and visions, what you're trying to accomplish as an organization. And then from there, it means creating an assessment and analyzing your needs. We'll identify your needs and create a 3 to 5 year strategy to address those needs. A really important piece of this is the team aspect. So our team and your team would be working together to accomplish this strategy. So today we are going to spend some time reviewing the updates and changes that came with the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, what your responsibility is as the employer, and then what solutions are available to you to alleviate the liability and workload for your organization. I'll also add that we're going to spend a little bit of time at the end of this presentation addressing the COBRA changes, as that's been affected by COVID as well. So with that, I'll go ahead and introduce Tammy Seaman and Task. So Task is a third-party administrator that works with employers of all sizes and offers more than 30 benefit accounts and compliance solutions. Tammy manages the FMLA team at Task and has been in the industry for a while with many years of experience. So Tammy, off to you.
Well, thank you very much, Amy, and good morning, everyone. And I want to thank WA for allowing us to come in and speak to this. Like FMLA was not hard enough to administer before, then COVID hit us and everybody's like, what do we do? If you want to advance the slide, Amy. This is just our confidentiality, and then we'll just go to the next slide with the agenda. So today we're going to go over what the FFCRA really means to the employer and what your responsibilities are. We'll cover the Act, the employers that are subject to the Act, the employees that are covered under it. We'll talk a little bit about furloughs, business closings, layoffs, emergency, FMLA paid leave, what does that mean? The emergency paid sick leave, what's the difference? The notification requirements, give you some DOL contact information, and give you some solutions. Next.
So before we go into our information, we're going to start with a couple of polls here. So if you wouldn't mind going ahead and answering this first poll question here. So are you currently handling FMLA and or other leaves in-house, or do you utilize a vendor partner? So if you could please go ahead and answer those questions. We'll give it a little bit more time here. We're almost full participation there. I'll just give it a few more seconds. I'm going to give it 3, 2, 1. We're at 70%, and most of you are handling it in-house. Great. So about 81% handling in-house.
Yep,
so
that's a lot of responsibility.
Absolutely. So next question. Has your organization experienced layoffs or furloughs or any other leave requests during the COVID pandemic? We are getting a mix of answers here. I'll give it a few more seconds. We're at 76% participation. 5 more seconds. All right, let's go ahead and finalize that one. This is split right down the middle about here. So about 47% of you have experienced furloughs or layoffs or any other sort of leave requests thus far in the pandemic.
And that's what we're pretty much seeing industry-wide too.
Awesome. All right, well, thank you so much for participating. We will have some at the end as well if you could continue to participate. But with that, Tammy.
Yep. If you could advance the slide to the next one. Okay, so we're all recovering from the holidays, getting on with our business, ready to hit 2020 with gusto. And then the pandemic comes. In March, all heck broke loose. The president did sign into law this new FFCRA. And I gotta say, the government did do a very good job in quickly responding to it. The problem was after they put that out, then they left the rest of us figuring out how do we manage this? We have to administrate this. And from what the poll is stating, a lot of you are handling it in-house, and I'm sure you had tons and tons of questions. Hopefully I can enlighten you a little bit today. And if there's something that we don't cover, please let Amy know in the survey at the end and ask your questions and she'll get back to you. So this whole FMLA, extended FMLA, emergency paid sick leave goes into effect April 1st. It is due to sunset December 31st. of this year. Now, keep in mind, this is kind of an ever-changing, evolving environment that we live in. Nobody's ever dealt with this before. So TASC is constantly monitoring the laws. We're keeping a real close eye right now on the HEROES Act and seeing how that might change both COBRA and FLMA. So the sunset is supposed to be at the end of the year, and we'll just keep an eye on that. Next. So who is subject to this? All public sector employers, except for the federal government, regardless of the size, and private sector employers of 500 employees or less, which really is the main users of FLMA and the impact that it has on your employee base. Now, employers with fewer than 50 employees do have some options to opt out of this regulation if it is proven that it is just not financially stable for their company. Next. So what does this law all comes down to? And we're going to try to make it really simple. The EFMLEA is an expanded FLMA. The only thing, let me back up 1 second. Let me just say, FLMA as we know it today stays in place. This expands, EFMLEA expands it to include one other event, and that is when an employee is unable to work or telecommute because they need to care for their child while their school or daycare is closed due to COVID. Now you might think, okay, school session is over, but that doesn't mean the leave event ends. A lot of working parents have daycare set up for the summer or camps. A lot of those are closed now too. So this need will continue throughout the rest of the year. And it's not as simple as one would think. We're getting a lot of interesting cases coming into us. According to the DOL, if your regular daycare is closed, but say you have another daycare down the road that is open, but maybe they've had a couple of COVID cases or there's something going on there and you don't feel safe taking your child there, the DOL is actually saying then you don't have to, and that you're entitled to take the EFMLEA because you don't have daycare or you don't feel comfortable taking your child to the daycare. So these cases can get pretty sticky. Now, what we're calling the EPSLA, which is the emergency paid sick leave, that is where most of your leave requests are going to fall under. This covers a whole host of different situations, and it is allowing the employee up to 80 hours paid leave to either care for themselves, care for another person, not necessarily a family member, or if they are subject to some kind of government, either city, county, state shutdown because of the COVID. Now, employers who have healthcare providers and emergency responders are not subject to this if they so choose. And we've seen a real mix of some of them choosing to honor the new regulation, some of them opting out of that. Next. Now, as far as the closures go, this regulation is not retroactive. So if you're an employer who allowed an employee time off before April 1st, you're going to have to find some way to cover them, either their PTO, sick time, a leave of absence, some other form. It will not be covered under this regulation. So April 1st going forward, if a business is closed, then an employee is not entitled to these privileges because they wouldn't be working. Most likely they're going to be go under the unemployment option. Now, if you're a business that, you're trying to stay open and you're doing your best, but it just comes to a part, or maybe the government has come in and said, there's no unessential working going on, so you have to close. During that time, an employee is not subject to, or is not entitled to any of this. They're not entitled to FMLA, EFMLA, or the emergency paid sick leave. If you're closed, then they're not subject to that. You're not subject to this, and they're not entitled to it, and they'd have to look for the unemployment benefits to cover them for that time period. Next. And this just goes more into if an employee is furloughed, the same thing. If they're furloughed, they're not entitled to the regulation protection. Now, the one thing that we need to caution employers about is that if you're laying off people, you don't want you can't lay off all those people who are currently on a leave, because that could look like discrimination. But that doesn't mean that you can't lay them off. If that job that that employee is doing is not functioning right now and you don't have the work, then you have every right for furloughs or layoffs. Just because an employer has reduced the work schedule because of the lack of work does not entitle an employee to either FMLA or the EPSLA. Next. This just goes over the same thing. Whether it's furloughed or laid off, during that time period, an employee is not entitled to coverage. Next. Okay, so let's go over the expanded FLMA, because a lot of employers are getting really confused on what this means. And I just need to emphasize, the only time this comes into play is when it involves an employee who cannot work or telecommute because they need to care for a minor child. Now, we say minor child because that's going to be most of your circumstances. There may be circumstances where an employee has an adult child that they are a guardian of, or they are responsible for, who may need to take this leave as well. Now, every penny that the employer pays out in this coverage is going to be reimbursed back to them in payroll tax credits. The DOL doesn't have any guidelines about this, but I do have to warn you that the IRS does have a few guidelines. And what the IRS indicated was that when children are over 14 years of age or older, you have to have a reason provided why that child cannot stay home alone, why the employee does need to take this leave option and stay home with them. Your best practice is to get something in writing from that employee stating, and it can be as simple as stating their name, the reason why they're out, the child's name, their age, and the reason being why they have to stay home with them. You can also require documentation from a newspaper clipping that there was a government issued stay-at-home order, or notice from your daycare provider that they are not open due to COVID. Some kind of documentation we encourage the clients to have in their files. Not that the IRS would necessarily come back and ask you for that, but they could, and it also helps your payroll department understand and keep track of when they're paying these employees so that they can file for the proper tax credits. Our lawyers at Task did come up with a form that we provided to our clients that they could use and that they could modify if they so choose for this documentation purposes. So with the EFMLEA, the first 10 days is unpaid, and then the employee is allowed up to 10 weeks for a total of 12 weeks. This time taken is taken from the same bank of time that their traditional FLMA is. So if you have an employee who had surgery in January and they were out for 4 weeks, and now they're coming to you and they're asking for this extended leave, they're only going to be entitled to up to 8 weeks of this coverage. So the 12 weeks is a maximum combination of both the regular FLMA and this expanded. Now this is where it gets a little confusing, is they're saying the first 10 days is not paid, and that an employee may take PTO, sick time, some other leave. Well, they can also take the emergency paid sick leave portion of the regulation. They can be covered for the first 2 weeks under that, and then go into the next 10 weeks paid under the EFMLEA. The upside to this is it's still the same rate of pay. It's 2/3 pay. So that way it doesn't get confusing. However, an employee is entitled to supplement that 2/3 pay with other paid leaves that they have available to them, whether it be vacation time, sick time, PTO. Next. So everything else that people are asking for time off will now fall under this EPSLA, which is an emergency paid sick leave. This is the 80 hours. This is in addition to anything else that they may already have as a benefit through your employment. And this can cover themselves if they're ill, or if their doctor has indicated to them that they must self-quarantine, if they're taking care of other people who are ill or have to self-quarantine. And then, as you can see, for childcare as well. There are maximums amounts that can be paid out, and there is calculations. The DOL did do a really good job on outlining calculations, and we've helped many of our clients figure out that as well and what those employees are paid. Now, the thing about this emergency paid sick leave is it is not FLMA. We cannot count that against their FLMA time. This is in addition to any FLMA, any PTO, any other leave. And the employer will get reimbursed through those payroll tax credits for what they pay out on this. Next. So what is required? What is you as an employer are you responsible for doing? It is simply posting the new DOL regulations. And this poster can be sent via email. It can be put on internet if you have that, or just posted in your break rooms or wherever you post your other DOL. The thing with this whole COVID thing was everybody went remote. So we had a lot of people coming saying, well, how do we get this to these people? And like we've said, you need to get it to them. You can mail it to them, or you can email it to them, or if you have an internet site, you can post it there. But you do have to get this information out to the employees. Next. There are penalties involved if you're not abiding by the new regulations under the FFCRA. Those can range from a couple $100 to a couple $1,000. Lawsuits, as we all know, when it comes to FLMA, can definitely get into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. TASC has, anybody that is a client of TASC, we have a hold harmless agreement where we will back you up $1 million per incident should you ever have to go to court due to a lawsuit based on FLMA. And this will extend to the EFMLEA protection that we're now required to administer. Next. There was a period, and many of you may have experienced some unrest when all of this happened between the end of March and the beginning of April, not knowing what the law said, how to administrate it. And the DOL said, well, we're going to give you a few weeks to figure it out. So everybody had until April 24th, where they did not necessarily have to have been actively enforcing the new regulations and giving them time. Thereafter, the DOL did come back and say, you'll be subject to fines and penalties, just like if you were administering FLMA. But if during that time period you showed good faith and that you were trying to put this all together, make changes in your employee handbooks, getting notification out to the employees, the DOL, if you need to go through a DOL audit, that time period will be forgiven. Next. Basically the same thing. Next. So task was, I have to say, I'm very, very proud. We had an entire team come together over that first weekend when the Senate and the House were negotiating what this law was going to look like and trying to figure it out. So we were ready to hit the ground running when they finally did approve it. And so we notified all of our clients immediately of their responsibilities of the ELA, and we identified the employees, the employers who were subject to it. Again, it was for any employer under 500 in the private sector and all public entities regardless of the number of employees. During this time period, we also identified that there was a real need for employers with 50 or less. Employers with 50 or less don't have to deal with FLMA. So this was all new and kind of a scary situation for them, because now they have to administer something that they never have, and very quickly. So we came out with a product that would allow us to administer that for them. And those employers are only subject to the EFMLEA, and we send all the notifications out to the employees, so they didn't have to scramble to get all of that information together and know the regulations. As if you're administering yourself, you know the wording can be very difficult at sometimes, and this was all new. The DOL didn't have anything to support it, left everyone scrambling. So we wanted to put out to our partners who are under 50 employees the opportunity for us to administrate that. As I've indicated, we continue to keep an very close eye on this. There has been some discussions in legislation about changes to FLMA for the rest of the year. As you can well imagine, during this whole period, a lot of people exhausted their FLMA. You're only allowed the 12 weeks. We've had a lot of situations where employers are coming to us and say, well, now what do we do? Well, the job protection under the FLMA or the EFMLEA is expired after the 12 weeks, and then employers are encouraged to work with their employees and to offer them other options, whether that's a leave of absence or some other paid options as far as vacation time stuff goes. And we're going to keep an eye on this and see where the legislation goes, and if there's going to be any expansion on it, if there's going to be any changes, whether that will be retroactive.
So Tammy, just real quick, just to make sure I'm understanding correctly, for employers who have had to administer their FMLA prior to the COVID pandemic, TASC will continue to administer the FMLA, but also take over the EFMLA administration, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Right. And then for employers, like you said, who have not had to deal with or administer FMLA before. Task will now offer a solution to those employer groups that are just dealing with EFMLA.
That's correct.
Awesome.
So just a little bit of what TASK does. We've have a process in place so we can identify the EFMLEA separate from the traditional FMA. And I'd like to just take a moment here and talk about that, because I know a lot of you might be dealing with this exact situation right now. Is COVID by itself is not a covered FLMA event. Just as, for example, the flu has never been an FLMA event unless there are complications. Now, clearly we know with COVID, it can get very messy. Somebody can be hospitalized, they can be on oxygen. Then that becomes a traditional FLMA event that you'll want to cover. Now, traditional FLMA is not paid. This regulation does not change that in any way. But a lot of the clients are struggling with knowing what is covered now and what isn't covered. And that is one of the things where our experts on our team can evaluate a medical certification and make that determination and explain it to the employee why they are or are not covered. If somebody comes to you and they have COVID symptoms and they say they want to take a leave, or their doctor has indicated to them that they have to self-quarantine, that situation becomes the emergency paid sick leave and is covered for that up to 80 hours. Now, somebody comes to you and they're in chemo treatment, or they have some other very serious underlying condition, and their doctor's like, you cannot get this COVID, you have to self-quarantine. They're going to have to, in all likelihood, quarantine for longer than 80 hours. That then can become a traditional FLMA event. Of course, FLMA, again, unpaid, but from the employer's perspective, that is a legitimate traditional FLMA event. The only thing that is covered under the expanded FLMA is in those cases where childcare needs to be provided. Here at TASK, we send out, if we deny somebody, we send out immediate notification to the employer so they know what they're going to be dealing with. We have activity reports, which we stay in communication with our clients with. We also have training for supervisors and managers to understand FLMA, EFLMA, all the new regulations that are into place. We have a dedicated team. I liked when Amy said about the WA team and that you had the whole team there to support you. That is the same thing at TASK. You don't have one designated person. You have an entire team designated to you. We do have our own toll-free number. Both clients and employees can call us. And we also have our own dedicated email box where that too you can contact us through. As I indicated, we do have a hold harmless agreement where TASK will back you up to $1 million per incident should you ever have to go to court for an FLMA situation. Next. So for communications on the new expanded EFMLEA, like I indicated, you're responsible for making sure that the poster is seen by everybody. If you are issuing leave requests, there's your verbiage on your leave request, your standard FLMA verbiage will not work. You do have to expand on that a little bit. And we've spent a lot of time here at TASK making sure that all of our communications are updated. So next. And this is just some websites that can support you. I'll have to say, once the DOL had an opportunity to evaluate what's going on, they were really good with their Q&A that they published, and that has a lot of great answers for you. Also, Task has Task Connections. We have a person on staff who their entire job is to communicate with Washington and to stay abreast of all the changes that are going on. So, and that is open to anybody can go see it. You don't have to be a Task client to view that. Next. And this just outlines the task responsibilities. Same as with our traditional FLMA. You notify us of the need for leave. We will do all the paperwork. We'll do the eligibility of the employee, and we'll calculate and make decisions on approvals for these leaves. Okay, thank you. And again, this is just indicating that to remind you that private sector employers under 500, those under 50 may have the opportunity to opt out of this regulation if they find it financial hardship. And then of course, all public sectors are subject to this. Next. Again, there's some resources, Capital Connection there. That's a great resource. And then there's some other ones issued by the government. And I'm sure you guys have been out there searching for a lot of answers. Next. So the operational differences for task, we have an implementation team, we have national support, we have employees who are in almost every state. We have our employees are remote ready. That was an advantage to Task when this all started is we were already set up remote, ready to go. Those that worked in the home office, within 2 weeks, we're out working remote. So we're there for you every day of the week. We're not going anywhere. We have staff attorneys that we consult with all the time. We have compliance directors, and again, I want to point out the hold harmless, which can be a real lifesaver for clients to feel like if something does happen, Task's got your back. Some other services that we offer, and you can definitely speak with WA about this, is we have ERISA and COBRA. We have a whole host of other opportunities as well. If you have anything, pretty much anything under the sun that you can think of as far as a benefit for your employees, we can definitely work with you and to administer that. Okay, I think that wraps that part of it up, Amy.
Yeah, and do you want to do polls next, or do you want to cover the COBRA section next? What would be best?
Let's do the COBRA section, because I know everybody's pretty anxious about that.
Yes.
So Amy sent me a list of questions prior to this, and I do have some answers for you on those questions. And keep in mind, this is evolving as we speak. There's going to be new legislation out. We're keeping a very close eye on what that's all going to entail. In all likelihood, there will be some kind of COBRA supplements. So the guidelines that have been set up for this, somebody asked about if there are new notices available for these guidelines, and yes, there is. The DOL has come out with new guidelines and notices that you can post. Task has already taken the opportunity to notify all of our clients of the new notices. We have also updated all of our general notices, our election notices, our terminations, coupons. We sent out emails to all of our clients letting them know of the changes. And if you are a task client, there's also updates that have been put out on My Task. So when you log in there, you'll see the new regulations. This does include Minnesota continuation. That was one question that was asked. And then another question is, must premiums accompany COBRA coverage request? And the answer is no, just like it does now. What this regulation really does right now is expand the time frame in which somebody can elect COBRA. So a lot of layoffs, a lot of furloughs right now. People will be needing to have COBRA. They'll be sent a COBRA notice. And then what is not clear is the exact dates of this. The regulation is stating that once the national emergency has been announced to come to an end, there will be a breakout period of 60 days to allow people to make to send out COBRA notices and to make decisions. Now, after that breakout period ends, the COBRA participants, their dependents, have another 60 days to elect COBRA and to pay for it. So let's take an example. Say June 30th, the president indicates that the national emergency has ended. There's that 60-day breakout period, which will bring us to August 29th. Now, from August 29th, an employee has 60 days to elect COBRA and then pay for it. But they will have to pay the entire amount. So say they were laid off April 1st, they're going to have to go back all the way to April 1st and make those premium payments. That can be, as we all know, if you've ever been in COBRA, a real hefty bill. So what task and actually across the industry, what's been discussed is we're going to continue to administer COBRA as we always have. We're still going to follow the same guidelines. We're encouraging employees to make their election during their regular time frame and to make regular payments if at all possible, just so that at the end they don't have this really large bill that they can't make. Keeping in mind that employees will have the 60 days after the breakout period has ended to complete their COBRA election and to pay for it. But because this could be very overwhelming, like I've said, the task and the industry has decided to administer within the timeframes that exist right now. What will happen, however, is that an employee can come back at any time during this extended period and say, I want to be reinstated, and we will file reinstatement. Now, the tricky part comes into play is for you as an employer working with your carriers. Not all carriers will go back to inception on the reinstatements. So that's why we've asked, that's why we've taken the direction of sticking with the current time frame to try to keep it consistent. So let me get back to the questions that was asked. So must premiums accompany COBRA coverage request? The answer is no, just as today. But with that 60-day period after the breakout, the premiums will need to be paid. Does this extension apply to all lines of coverage COBRA eligible? And yes, it does. Indicated that you do need to post the new DOL and letting employees know that they do have this extension time. Anything that TAS sends out has the regulations in there and outlines it for the employee. So I think that pretty much covers it right now. Like I said, we don't know exact dates because the national emergency has not been declared an end yet. Breakout period will be 60 days after that is declared, and then employees will have 60 additional days after that to make their elections.
Awesome. Thank you so much for covering that COBRA extension information. So we have about a minute left here. So if we could launch that third poll question here, if you wouldn't mind. The question is, are you concerned about administrating EFMLA or the FFCRA leaves correctly? And if you could go ahead and submit your answer. We'll give it a 10 more seconds or so. We're at about 62%, another 3, 2, 1. All right, we can end that poll. It looks like, again, some of you feel pretty comfortable with it, but a majority of us still have some concerns. And the last question, if you would help us out with this last question here. Would it be of value to you to have someone taking on the workload and liability of the FMLA and or EFMLA and any of the other FFCRA leaves that are happening right now? Give it another 8 seconds. And 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much for participating in those polls. Go ahead and close that out. So again, just huge thanks to everyone for joining this webinar today. Huge thanks to Tammy and Task for providing all of this information and providing your resources. Again, we will leave the webinar open for a little bit here. If you have any questions that you did not get a chance to submit, go ahead and do so in that Q&A section. Another reminder that we will send out all the questions and answers that were asked throughout today's webinar to anyone who participated or registered in this webinar. And then the FAQ, as well as today's recording of the webinar, will be posted on our website, walivebig.com. If you need to reach out to one of us on the benefits team, here is our contact information. We'd be happy to talk with you and show you how we can assist with any of this information or other benefit needs. But otherwise, that concludes our webinar. And again, thanks everyone.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.